Chapter 1: The DNA Test That Changed Everything. Mia Carter wasn't expecting much when she spat into a plastic tube and mailed it off. It was just supposed to be a fun distraction, a desperate attempt to feel connected to something when her life felt like it was barely holding together. She sat in her tiny, dimly lit apartment, the hum of the old fridge filling the silence. Bills were stacked on the counter, unopened. Her shift at the diner had been brutal, like every night. Another day of balancing plates, forcing smiles, and counting coins to make rent. When the email notification popped up on her phone 3 weeks later, she almost forgot about the test entirely. "Your DNA results are in." She tapped the screen, not expecting anything beyond a pie chart of her ethnic background. Maybe a distant cousin or two. But as the page loaded, her heart slammed against her ribs. Parent-child match found. Mia's fingers trembled as she clicked on the match. Victoria Hastings' 99.9% probability. The name meant nothing to her, but beneath it, there was another message. "You have pending messages from your family." Her vision blurred as she read the words over and over. This has to be a mistake. She had been adopted as a baby. She knew that much. But her adoptive parents had passed when she was young, and she had spent most of her life in and out of foster care. No one had ever come looking for her. No one had ever claimed her. So why now? And who were the Hastings? Swallowing the lump in her throat, Mia clicked on the first message. "Eleanor, this is your grandmother, Victoria Hastings. We have been searching for you for over 20 years. Please call me. We need to talk." The next one was even more urgent. "We can explain everything. We will take care of you. Just let us bring you home." Home. The word felt foreign. Mia's hands clenched the edges of her phone as she quickly typed, "Are you sure you have the right person?" and hit send. Within minutes, a reply came. "We have no doubt, and the DNA proves it. You are Eleanor Hastings, and you belong with us." Mia exhaled sharply. A wealthy family searching for her? A past she never knew existed. This wasn't just some long-lost relative situation. This was something else, and for the first time in her life, she had no idea if she wanted the answers or if she should run. Chapter 2: Welcome to the Hastings Estate. The car glided smoothly along the winding road, flanked by towering trees that seemed to close in around Mia as she neared her destination. The further she traveled, the more surreal everything felt. Just days ago, she had been waiting tables, scraping by in her tiny apartment. Now, she was being chauffeured in a sleek black car toward a sprawling estate owned by a family she had never met, one that claimed to be hers. She smoothed her sweater, feeling out of place against the car's pristine leather interior. The driver, a stone-faced man named Harris, had barely spoken a word since picking her up at the airport. When they finally emerged from the dense woods, Mia's breath caught in her throat. The Hastings estate was enormous, an elegant mansion with tall marble columns, sprawling balconies, and ivy creeping up its stone walls. It looked straight out of a movie, the kind of place where secrets clung to the walls like shadows. As the car slowed to a stop, the front doors swung open. A tall, silver-haired woman stood at the entrance, her presence commanding. Victoria Hastings, the woman who had sent the messages. Mia hesitated. Everything inside her told her to be cautious, to stay guarded. But then Victoria stepped forward, her cold blue eyes studying Mia with an intensity that made her stomach twist. "Eleanor," Victoria said smoothly, as if confirming it for herself. Mia swallowed hard. "It's Mia." Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line. "That was never your real name." Before Mia could respond, a younger woman stepped forward. Isabel Hastings, Victoria's daughter-in-law. Unlike Victoria, her smile was warm, but there was something tense in her expression. "We're so glad you're here," Isabel said, her voice softer than Victoria's. "This must be overwhelming for you." Mia nodded, suddenly hyper-aware of how out of place she felt. Then came Robert Hastings, Victoria's son, a man in his 50s with sharp features and calculating eyes. He offered a stiff handshake. "You look like your father," he said, though there was no warmth in his tone. And finally, Julian Hastings, Robert's son. Unlike the others, Julian's expression wasn't guarded. It was unreadable. He studied Mia like she was an unsolved puzzle. "Welcome home," he said, though there was an edge to his voice. Home. The word felt hollow. Mia stepped inside, the air instantly cooler. The grand chandelier above cast a soft glow over the vast foyer, but the house felt too big, too quiet, like a place filled with ghosts of the past. Victoria turned to her. There's much to discuss, but first, we'll have dinner. Something about the way she said it made it sound less like an invitation and more like a command. After being shown to her lavish guest suite, a room bigger than her entire apartment, Mia freshened up and took a moment to breathe. But as she stepped into the hallway, a whispered voice startled her. She turned sharply. A maid stood a few feet away, eyes darting nervously toward the stairwell. An older woman, her expression urgent. "You should leave," the woman murmured. "You don't belong here." Mia's heart slammed against her ribs. What? But before she could get an answer, the woman hurried away, disappearing into the shadows of the house. Mia stood frozen, an uneasy feeling creeping up her spine. Something was wrong here, and she had just walked straight into it. Chapter 3, Buried Secrets and Missing Memories. The Hastings estate was beautiful, but something about it felt suffocating. The grand halls were too pristine, the family's smiles too practiced. Every interaction felt like walking on cracked ice, fragile and uncertain. Mia wasn't naive. She knew she wasn't truly welcome here, and that only made her more determined to find out why. Over the next few days, Mia tried to adjust, but the more she listened to the stories about her supposed childhood, the less they felt like they belonged to her. "You used to love playing in the gardens," Isabel told her over breakfast. "Your mother could barely get you to come inside." Mia forced a smile, but no such memory existed in her mind. The only childhood she remembered was moving from one foster home to another, never having a place to call her own. She spent time wandering the estate, letting her fingers trail along the cold walls, hoping to trigger something, a flash of recognition, a sliver of memory. But there was nothing, until she found West Wing. One evening after dinner, Mia explored the estate alone. She followed the dimly lit corridors until she reached a part of the house that felt different. Dust gathered along the baseboards, the air thick with stillness. It was clear no one had been here in a long time. At the end of the hallway, she found it, a locked door. Something about it called to her. She glanced around before testing the handle. Locked, but when she pushed, the door groaned slightly, as if the latch was weak. With a sharp shove, it creaked open. Inside, the room was untouched, frozen in time. The furniture was covered in sheets, a faint scent of old perfume lingering in the air. And then she saw it, the porcelain jewelry box on the dresser. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the lid. A familiar tune played. A song she didn't recognize, but somehow it still sent chills down her spine. Then she noticed the letters inside. A stack of them, yellowed with age, tied together with a ribbon. She unfolded the first one. "Eleanor, if you ever find this, it means you're in danger." Her breath hitched. The letter was written in a woman's delicate handwriting. Her mother's, she continued reading, her hands shaking. "I tried to protect you, but they won't stop. They can't know the truth. If anything happens to me, don't trust them, any of them." Mia's stomach twisted. She barely noticed the floorboard creaking behind her. Someone was there. She spun around, heart pounding. Julian stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice low. Mia quickly shoved the letters behind her back. "I was just looking around." His gaze flickered to the jewelry box, to the open drawer. For a tense moment, neither of them spoke. Then Julian sighed. "You shouldn't be here." Mia studied him carefully. "Why not?" He hesitated before answering. "Because this room belonged to your mother," he said, his voice quieter now. "And she wasn't supposed to leave either." Chapter 4. Mia barely slept that night. The discovery of her mother's hidden letters had cracked something open inside her, a deep, unsettling feeling that whatever had happened to her family had been deliberate. And Julian's words kept echoing in her head. "You were never meant to come back." What did that mean? Who had been keeping her away? And more importantly, why? The next morning, Mia woke up with a sense of unease clinging to her skin. The Hastings family acted normal over breakfast, too normal. Victoria remained as cold and unreadable as ever. Robert barely acknowledged her. Isabel tried to keep up friendly conversation, but there was tension in her smile. Mia's mind raced as she played along, pretending everything was fine. She needed time to think, time to figure out who she could trust. After breakfast, she wandered the estate alone, lost in thought. But when she reached the grand staircase, the wide, spiraling set of stairs that led down to the main hall, a cold shiver ran down her spine. Something felt off. She shook the feeling away and stepped forward. That's when it happened. A sharp shove from behind. Mia's world tilted. Her breath caught in her throat as she lost her balance, her foot slipping off the edge. Time seemed to slow. She reached out, hands grasping at nothing as she tumbled forward, until a strong grip seized her wrist. Mia gasped, her heart pounding as she looked up. Julian. He held her tight, muscles tensed as he pulled her back onto solid ground. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Julian's expression darkened as he looked over Mia's shoulder. She followed his gaze, but the hallway behind her was empty. Whoever had pushed her was already gone. Mia's breath came in shaky bursts. Someone tried to. I know, Julian murmured. I saw. His jaw clenched, his usual unreadable expression cracking for the first time. Someone had just tried to kill her. And Julian Hastings was the only reason she was still alive. Mia sat in the library, hands still trembling around the cup of tea Julian had given her. Neither of them had told the rest of the family about the accident. Mia, it wouldn't matter. If someone in this house wanted her dead, she couldn't expect the Hastings to care. I told you before, Julian said quietly, watching her from across the room. You were never meant to come back. Mia looked up at him, her throat dry. Then tell me the truth. What happened to my mother? Julian hesitated. No one knows for sure. She disappeared after your father died. Mia narrowed her eyes. That's the version everyone tells me. What do you think happened? Julian sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. I think she was running from something. Mia swallowed hard. Or from someone. The room felt colder. Julian leaned forward, voice lower now. You need to be careful, Mia. If someone tried to push you down those stairs, it means they're getting desperate. Mia met his gaze. Desperate for what? Julian's jaw tightened. To make sure you disappear. Again. Chapter 5, Lies, Deception, and a Hidden Enemy. The near fall down the staircase changed everything. Mia had felt it, the deliberate push, the force behind it. Someone wanted her dead. But the worst part? She didn't know who. She couldn't trust the Hastings. She wasn't even sure she could trust Julian. That meant she needed help from someone outside the family. The Hastings estate staff worked in the background, silent and obedient. But one person stood out. Daniel Parker, the estate's head of security. He was in his 40s, sharp-eyed and quiet, always lingering just a little too long whenever she was nearby. And that night, when Mia found him alone in the dimly lit hall near the servants' quarters, she took a chance. I know someone pushed me, she whispered. Daniel's expression didn't change, but he didn't deny it either. Instead, he exhaled slowly. You shouldn't be here, Miss Hastings. Mia's stomach clenched. Why does everyone keep saying that? Daniel hesitated, then glanced around, making sure no one else was listening. Because the last time a Hastings woman tried to leave this family, she disappeared. Mia's pulse hammered. Her mother. Before she could ask more, Daniel slipped something into her hand, a small, folded piece of paper. Your mother wasn't planning to stay, he said in a low voice. She was planning to run, but she never made it out. Then he walked away, leaving Mia standing there with the first real piece of proof that her mother's disappearance wasn't an accident. Back in her room, Mia unfolded the aged note, her hands trembling. If anything happens to me, it won't be an accident. Get Eleanor out. Get her far away. Don't trust them. The signature at the bottom was smudged, but the first letter was clear. C. Mia's breath caught. Her mother's name was Catherine Hastings. She clutched the letter, her mind racing. This was confirmation. Her mother knew she was in danger. And the worst part, she had been trying to save Mia, too. But someone had stopped her. Someone had kept Mia hidden all these years. And now that same person wanted to make sure she stayed gone. Determined to find more answers, Mia snuck back to the West Wing, her mother's abandoned room. But as she reached for the doorknob, something made her freeze. The door was slightly ajar. She hadn't left it that way. Heart pounding, she pushed it open slowly. The room had been ransacked. The dresser drawers were pulled open, the jewelry box overturned, the letters she had found before, gone. Someone had been here. Someone had seen her. Then she spotted it, a small white card, placed neatly on the dresser. Mia's breath hitched as she read the words. Stop digging. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't just a warning, it was a threat, and it meant she was getting too close to the truth.